Now that you finally decided you want to get yourself a wood burning stove to add to your house, there are four steps you need to take so that you comply with all the statutes and laws that your town or city that you live in requires you to comply with. And chances are, the information I'm about to tell you, the place you're buying a stove from will not tell you. The first step you're gonna take is ask yourself, okay, where am I gonna put this stove and how am I gonna locate the stove in a room of choice? For example, what you see over here is the wood burning stove that we chose. It's a Manchester unit with the soapstone, and we decided we were gonna put it in the living room near the entrance of the house, and we were gonna locate it in a corner fashion so that faces the living room rather than being parallel to the wall. That's the first thing you're gonna ask yourself. The second thing is, where will the chimney come out? Is the chimney gonna come out in the ceiling, or are you gonna have it come out of the wall? And the third question you're gonna ask yourself, and you're gonna ask the person that's selling the stove, how long will it be before I can get this stove installed? Because you're gonna need time to get with a contractor and get with the city in order to get the permits that you need and the labor that you need to get the base done of where the fireplace is gonna get installed and have all the safety features to make sure that you don't set your house on fire. For example, we didn't find out until the installation process was happening. There were a few inches off to where the chimney or the smokestack was gonna go through. And we actually got lucky because there were only a few inches away between the trusses in order for us to put the pipe through the ceiling. Now, mind you, the wife, she wanted a straight pipe and didn't want any curves within the pipe because of airflow efficiency. Also, the moment you start adding curves is also the moment that, and where those curves are is where the smoke will slow down at the curve and where the creosote accumulation will take place the most. And one last thing in regards to step one is to make sure that when you do get the stove installed is that you follow all manufacturer recommendations, which those who will install the stove for you will actually take care of it for you, because this thing weighs 520 pounds. It's not like you're going to be able to install this on your own. Now, mind you, for example, when we decided to get our stove and we went to the place nearby where we live, we were told that it was going to be 9 months. 9 months. This is during the COVID time. Anyway, 9 months before we were going to receive the actual stove delivered. And we got it literally 2 days before Christmas. So we had 9 months to figure all this out. Nowadays, with the fact that we don't have a COVID anymore, at least for the time being anyway, you may not have 9 months to get a stove because maybe they're not as back ordered today as they were a year ago when we got our stove. The second step you're going to take is permits. You're going to go to the city hall building department and you're going to tell them, look, I want to put a wood burning stove into the house, and what kind of permits are required for this wood burning stove. What they're going to ask you is, okay, you're going to need to draw up a sketch of the dimensions of your hearth or the corner where you're going to install the stove, such as this. We had to literally issue drawings of how big this whole area was going to be. And because of the wife wanted it on an earth, meaning it was slightly raised off the ground, we actually had to rechannel a heating and air conditioning vent that was located right there. And what the contractor did, under the slab of granite, that there is a plywood, and under the plywood there are trusses, not trusses, but beams of 4x4 and 2x4. The 4x4s are right under the stove, as you can see in the drawings or in the picture. And then what we did, we rechanneled the heating and air conditioning duct so that it would come out right there, so we could still make use of that particular duct. So once we issued them the drawings of how big this area was going to be, they also wanted to know what kind of materials we were going to use, that they were going to be fire resistant. As I mentioned, the wife wanted granite, and mind you, the eyes get into this corner. I got to tell you, it came out beautiful. She wanted granite on the ground, and she wanted this type of stone in the back with a mantle. Now the mantle had to have a certain clearance, which you'll also see in the drawings that came with the owner's manual of the stove. There had to be certain beams under the ground here, and that was what the inspector required to see before the granite went down and before it actually got nailed down and got glued down by the contractor. Now, the original design was for the stove to be out more so that we didn't have to install cement, the cement walls, or it's a fireproof layer that is behind these bricks behind the wall, but the wife was adamant about getting them done anyway, just in case. Lo and behold, as a matter of fact, when the stove went in, because of where the trusses were in the ceiling, the stove had to go back a little bit, and it did not meet the clearance requirements by the manufacturer. And that's why had we not installed the fireproof cement sheets in the back of these walls, we would have had to tear these wall down to install this fire protection or heat resistant shields in the back of the stove. Like I said, so we had to issue the drawings for how the plant of the earth, how big it was going to be, where the stove was going to be. We also issue the specifications of the stove, how big the stove is, what is the maximum heating space that was going to heat up, how many BTUs it was going to put out. All that information at the city hall, the building department, that wanted to know about. So that was the second part that we had to take care of. So yeah, you're going to need to get permits, which I'll explain to you in the third step you're going to take as to why these permits are important. Step number 3, you're going to get rolling with the project of actually getting the location of where the stove is going to get installed. The construction needs to get started. Now, you can either do the work yourself, or you can have a contractor do the work for you, but there's a caveat to doing the work yourself. If you did the work yourself, you will still need a contractor to provide documentation that the work that you did was done according to the specification. Why? Because the homeowner's insurance is going to want to know that everything was done according to specification and up to code, because when the day comes, if you decide to sell your house, first thing they're going to look at when they walk through that door is the stove, and they're going to ask, was the stove done according to specs? Because prior to you having a house, there was no stove. So that's why they're going to ask that question. It's going to actually warrant that question of say, is this documentation available to make sure that the stove was done properly? As you go about doing the construction of the corner or the area where you're going to install the stove, get in touch with your inspector, he or she, and ask them at what point do they need to see what they need to see to make sure that the project that you're building, the corner that you're going to install the stove, is being done according to specification, and what do they need to see. For example, in this house, we had a cement walls in the back of the stove is a fire-resistant material, and we ended up using granite, like I mentioned, is a fire-resistant material. Those were the fire-resistant material criteria, but there also had to be a structural integrity and the structural characteristics under the granite to sustain the weight of the stove. That's what I mentioned to you earlier. There were 2 4x4 beams that sit exactly under where the legs of the stove are, and there are cross beams to make sure that the weight is properly sustained and distributed. Because mind you, this slab of granite is also, believe it or not, almost pretty heavy. I want to say it was close to 1,000 pounds or so, and that too had to have the proper structure under it to sustain the stone. And mind you, the stone is also delicate, so you don't want it to crack on you. And last step, guys, step number 4, read the owner's manual. That will tell you all the safety information and the guidelines to maximize the life and the use of your stove. Because just because you have a stove installed, that doesn't mean you can burn anything into the stove. Like, for example, you should not be burning garbage, and you should not be burning items that get so hot they will surpass the heat range and characteristic of the stove. For example, in this particular stove, I cannot burn coal because it probably gets too hot. All I can burn inside of the stove is cord wood, a natural wood. You chop down a tree, you let it dry, you split it, and that's all I can burn. Also tells you when it comes to maintenance, what you can do. For example, if the glass breaks, what you need to do to replace that, the different seals. The stove, because it meets the EPA regulations and all the current regulations, I actually have to have a catalytic converter that is activated through this lever right here, so that I do not put out as much pollution elements into the atmosphere. Make sure that you're safe about using your stove, and it's also highly recommend you to have a fire extinguisher near your stove, just in case, because you never know. Be safe about burning. I mean, I know you want to have a stove just like I do, but you want to be safe about it. You don't want to burn down your house and a neighbor's house either. That's why you got to follow all rules and regulations, and follow the owner's manual, which will give you all the guides which you can and cannot burn, the maintenance procedures for it, inspection procedures, and also a list of an illustrated parts catalog, a list of parts that when things go fail, you can replace. Because after all, it is a unit, somewhat like a machine that over time it will fail. But as always, as long as you keep up with it, you do what the owner's manual tells you to do and not to do, and it will greatly extend the life of a stove. So like I said, when you first decide to get a stove, make sure you decide what you want to do, how you want to do it, where you want to do it, and how big a stove you want to have, so that when you have all that information, you're going to want to take that information to City Hall to get yourself permits, because they're going to want to know what kind of stove it is, the specifications of the stove, and all the fire-resistant material that you're going to need to make sure that you're not burning anything down, you're not endangering yourself, and you're not endangering the neighborhood. And like I said, step 3 is, once you get rolling with this project, make sure you do it according to specification, not only to meet your inspector's criteria, and make sure it's going to be a progressive inspection. He's going to probably come more than once or twice to make sure that all the elements are in place to safeguard the house that you live in and a neighbor's house. Make sure you don't burn anything down. And also, insurance company is going to want to know is to make sure that it got done according to specifications, according to code, and according to proper installation procedures. Because if you don't, when the time comes to sell the house, I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to be able to sell the house. And 4, make sure that when you do have the stove installed, you follow all the procedures that are dictated in the owner's manual. I hope this video was of help to you guys. Like and subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and we will see you next time.